Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Wilson Stribling. Welcome to another edition of At Issue, where we discuss and debate the issues facing the state of Mississippi and how these issues impact you. At Issue tonight, funding public school education. The House moved quickly yet again on another big topic during week 3 of the legislative session. Republicans fast-tracked a bill that calls for rewriting the public school funding formula known as the Mississippi Adequate Education Program. Democrats strongly oppose the bill. The Mississippi Uniform Per Student Funding Formula Act of 2018 calls for setting the base cost for educating each student at $4,800. More money can be given for students with specific needs like special education, English learners, and gifted. School districts would receive funding equal to what they received for fiscal year 2018 for the next 2 years to give them time to understand the new formula. Over the next 5 years, there would be an increase of $107 million total in district funding overall. On Wednesday, the House voted 66 to 54 to pass House Bill 957. Democrats attempted several times to amend the bill, and debate lasted into the evening. They say there was not enough time to go through the 300 pages of details in the bill. Republicans say the old funding formula, the MAEP, is outdated, confusing, and unrealistic. Newly appointed House Education Committee Chairman Richard Bennett of Long Beach was the only Republican speaking in favor of the bill. Several Democrats spoke against it. Here's the debate on the House floor.
In this formula, I believe the economic status of different areas in Mississippi impacts educational support. The only way to shift this weight is to reconsider the formula so additional funds go to our most vulnerable areas. Mississippi has a chance to move in the right direction. If we don't use this as an opportunity to equitably move forward and provide support to the roughly 490,000 kids in this state, particularly those in rural areas, we're letting the people and the kids of Mississippi down.
There's many members here in this body that really doesn't know what this bill totally consists of. I've heard the chairman speak today. He spoke about MAEP formula, which has been in effect for some 20 years, and he said he still don't know what it's talking about. And it's been on the books for 20 years. How is it possible for us to know about this bill in 24 hours?
Ladies and gentlemen, we are entering into the shell game right here, dealing with this bill. Now, I understand that we are trying to get our funding together for our education, but playing the shell game won't do it. We don't know, there is no money in it. We don't know how we're going to get the money. We have no idea where we're going to get this bill, how we're going to get this bill rolling. So under cup number 1, there's no funding. So you say, hey, I'll pick cup number 3. Under cup number 3, there's no meat to the bill. And then you say, I'll take the middle cup. Well, guess what? You think it's there, and it could quite possibly be there, but it's not. There's no ball under the cup.
My heart aches for the young people of this state. It aches because while the doors for several swing wide open, the doors for a few in our communities get narrow and narrow each and every day. Every year we convene in this legislature, that door shrinks for folks in our state. And I'd like to believe that we're better than that.
I believe this is a good formula. I believe in this formula. I think it's a much better formula than MAEP. But don't let this divide us on going forward on improving education in Mississippi. We've got to improve education in Mississippi to move forward as a state. Again, I thank you for today. Thank you for sitting through it, putting through my presentation today. But again, I thank y'all. I ask you to vote for this bill. And I want you to know I appreciate and value every one of you in this chamber, and I consider you friends. Mr. Speaker, I ask for final passage.
Okay, we're now on to final passage, ladies and gentlemen. I ask everyone to find your seats. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. Question recurs on House Bill 957. If you favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Has everyone voted? Has everyone voted? Close the machine, Madam Clerk. By a vote of 67 yeas, 52 nays, the bill passes.
Democrats are not happy that elimination of the 27% rule was left out of the bill. EdBuild, the education firm hired by Republican leadership to study the education funding formula, had recommended that the rule be scrapped. Democrats say the rule limits the amount rich school districts are obliged to spend on public education and that removing the cap would give more money to poor districts. Republican House Speaker Philip Gunn says studying alternate options to the 27% rule will be an ongoing focus. Speaker Gunn released this statement. He says, quote, "We have accomplished the first step of our goal of sending more dollars to the teachers and students in the classroom. We have worked with the Lieutenant Governor and the Senate to craft this legislation that creates a more equitable, fair funding formula. We look forward to continue working with them as we see this bill through the legislative process. The current funding formula was written almost 2 decades ago and has not kept up with the needs of the classroom of the 21st century. We are moving to a student-centered funding formula. This new formula gives our districts more flexibility and predictability in spending, something superintendents have requested for years. School districts can spend their allocated money as they see fit to meet their needs, to meet the needs of their students in their district." End quote. Earlier this week, MPB's Desiree Frazier spoke with Chairman Bennett about rewriting the education funding formula.
I think it's a good bill. I think the bill is realistically a goal that we can achieve and will achieve. I think it's very important that we have a formula that the school districts and the school boards and superintendents know the amount of money they're going to get every year. Right now, the MAP is just not realistic. It's not going to be funded. It wasn't funded by the Democrats. It wasn't funded by the Republicans. And it's just an unrealistic goal.
What we're hearing from critics is that the $4,800 isn't really enough money, even with the weights.
You know, $4,800 may not be enough. I don't know. We're going to look at it. We're going to adjust things. Right now, the experts tell us that's where the number needs to be. And of course, to be honest with you, I don't know if there's ever enough. I would love to double it. I would have loved to have been able to fund MAEP, even at a larger. But I know that's not realistic. We have to live within our budget, within our means. And this is the best we can do right now, and I think it's a very, very fair number.
When you look at the add-ons, special ed, gifted, and all of that, do you see that making a big enough difference to compensate for what might be seen as a shortfall on the base student part, which is $4,800 until you get to high school, and then it becomes $6,200?
Right. Yeah, I do. I think the weights are a good starting point. That's what the professionals told us they needed to be at. There's going to be about 78 million more added to poverty students than we've had in prior years. And the English learners, that's a new weight for us. We've got it set at 20%. And because it's a new number and a lot of areas don't have that weight in there, we're going to have to look at it and see if that's enough and adjust accordingly.
What is it that you want people to really get out of what you are trying to explain?
I want them to understand that any funding formula is always going to be controversial. But I want everyone out there to understand, superintendents, school boards, parents, organizations, that we are giving this everything we've got to get it right. Would I like more money put into it? Absolutely. And just because the formula, and let me stress this, just because the formula gives you a certain amount of money, that doesn't mean that's all you're going to get. There's going to be a lot of money and programs coming in outside the formula. This is what you can bank on. This is what you can count on. You can set your budget based on this. Don't count on what's going to come outside the formula. Go ahead and hire your teachers, do what you've got to do every year, because this is the number you're going to get. I want people to understand and know that we're trying to do the right thing. We don't want someone out there believe that we're trying to hurt schools, because that's not the case. That is not the case. We're trying to live within our means.
House Bill 957 now heads to the Senate for approval. We asked the Senate Education Committee Chairman, Republican Gray Tollison of Oxford, for his thoughts on the bill. He says, quote, "I'm glad the House took action. We're early in the process. The Senate will have 1 month to review the bill. This will give members time to ask questions. Most of it is in the Ed Build report. That's our blueprint. I think it's a good and positive step in how we send money to school districts," end quote. Two key education advocacy groups, the Mississippi Association of Educators and the Parents Campaign, have concerns about the bill.
We do have many concerns. The main one we have right now is why is it being pushed so quickly through? We would like to be able to look at this with the eyes of the educators. We would like to be able to go to the different school districts and say, what do you really think about this bill? And will it help your district, or will it be a problem for your district? So that's what we would like to be able to do, and we don't think that we have been given that opportunity. I don't think we like the idea of passing a law that we're not sure that it's going to work for us, you know, and we do realize that things need to be looked at and adjusted sometimes, but to actually say we're going to pass this law and then decide if it's a good thing or not, that's not a good policy. That's not what if I did that in my classroom and I stood up and I said, okay, students, we're going to try this, and if it works, okay, if it doesn't, whatever, then my students would be very leery of my ability to teach in my classroom. So, we do have to adjust, but just passing a law and saying, okay, we'll fix it later. No, we don't want it that way.
What this bill calls for is far, far worse than what the current administration has provided public schools in the last 6 years, and it is about a quarter of what the Barber administration provided public schools in terms of funding increases to keep up with increasing costs and inflation. And we know that even with the current effort, school districts are really struggling, and this bill is going to put them even further behind. It will be absolutely detrimental. It's clear there is so much confusion about this bill. It's been acknowledged that there will be a lot of unintended consequences. It's a very complicated issue, and it needs a lot more study so that we make sure that we don't pass a law that will be detrimental to our state and to our children. We need to make sure on the front end that we're doing the right thing.
While much of the attention this week was on education, the Senate passed a bill this week that calls for spending hundreds of millions of dollars from the BP oil spill settlement on projects on the Gulf Coast. Senate Bill 2176 passed on Tuesday. It calls for creating the Gulf Coast Restoration Fund. The state will receive $750 million over the next 17 years from BP. The company agreed to the payout to cover economic damages as a result of the 2010 Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Gulf Coast lawmakers want that money to be used for projects in their districts, while other lawmakers have said the money should be spread out for other areas in Mississippi as well. A similar bill passed the Senate last session, but it died in the House. Let's now get straight to the point with views from both sides of the aisle. Austin Barber is a Republican national strategist. He's the founding partner of the Clearwater Group. Brandon Jones is a Democrat. He's an attorney with the Beria Jones law firm and a former member of the House. Brandon, Austin, good to have both of you with us again on At Issue. Education. Do we know anything more about this bill than we did this time last week when we were discussing it?
You know, last week I said that Speaker Gunn had committed to giving this bill a full vetting. I don't think we got that. Frankly, it was moved much more quickly than what was anticipated, and the 3-hour show there on the House floor wasn't very productive because we had a chairman who admittedly was not familiar with MAEP and was not sharp on the details about this current plan. What we do know is that this budget and this bill doesn't take place in a vacuum, that there's an overall budgetary issue in Mississippi. Over the last 10 years, we have fewer people working than we did 10 years ago. We have a state that is in a population decline, and revenue is fundamentally flat. And so we have a revenue problem in this state. And what this bill tells us is that we'll have $107 million spread out across 7 years. What that means is that the money going into our education system is really not even the equivalent of a cost of living adjustment that you might see in other budgetary areas. And so we know that this is going to start out as something of a loser just by virtue of what we're announcing we're going to put into education. So it's a problem. It's a political solution. I don't think that anybody who saw this week's debate can argue that this is a solution that's going to answer the education problem in Mississippi. And I think that should trouble all of us because there's been 2 years of clamoring for something.
That was a lot. Not quite sure how to respond to all of my friend across the table. It's really interesting, though. It's like the House and the Senate. You know, we've got the tortoise and the hare syndrome going on here. The House is really out fast on infrastructure, on education. They're determined to pass things really quickly on these big issues. I don't think that we have any question that education and infrastructure, and then I assume Medicare will be third, are the three big issues, but specifically infrastructure and education are the two big issues this year. And the House has said, man, we're going to pass these things right now. We want to get action. And of course, the Senate is going to take their time because that's what that body traditionally does, particularly under the leadership of Tate Reeves. But I think Brandon and I are just going to be in different places today on that. That's okay. We can disagree. First of all, it's $107 million more dollars that we're slightly confused. Is it $107 million more dollars per year? Is it $107 million more dollars over 5 years? Brandon says it's over 5 years.
7.
Well, really, so this just, I don't think today that any of us can definitively say to you how much more money K through 12 will get than they are right now. They will get more money. There's no question that for 2 years, the next 2 years, education funding will stay exactly the same at the district level that it is right now. Then there'll be a 5-year period where the new budgets will come into place. There'll be some losers, there'll be a lot of winners, and no doubt about that. But I think as we get back in next week, we can definitively say this is where it looks like from the House bill the education increase will be. But I'm not sure that I know right now how much it will be. But certainly it's going to be a long process where we can debate that.
You know, I just think that if Democrats brought out a proposal that overhauled one of our major areas of government and we couldn't answer detailed questions and we said, trust us, I have a sense of what Republicans would say to that. And so I think it's insincere for this group of Republicans in the House to roll out a plan and say, we're unclear on the details. None of us know even what the old formula is, but we have a sense this is going to do better. And we have two groups that represent teachers in this state who immediately said they are concerned that this actually is going to mean, because of some of the rigmarole in the bill, less money to the school districts in the coming fiscal year. So I don't understand it, and I think that there's some insincerity at the heart of all of this. The House, you know, the only thing worse, I guess, than not having any solution to the big problems facing the state of Mississippi is having bad ones. And I don't know that the infrastructure bill or this one are really sincere proposals.
Listen, the two ladies who were representing the two teachers' education groups, they're not going to be happy with what Republicans pass, regardless of what it is. And I'm sure they're nice people, and I don't know them personally, but that's just a fact. The Republicans, Democrats can't spend enough money, in their opinion, on education. And what they should remember, and what everybody should remember, is under this leadership group, we've had a teacher pay raise, we've had charter schools, we've had special needs grant program, we've had record funding for K through 12, but most importantly, and this is what you're making a good point about right now, but my pivot to you, my pushback is there's a new education formula passed the House of Representatives. It is centered around specific student needs, whether they're special ed, whether they're low income, gifted, high school. There's a $4,800 floor that every student's going to get. And then these others from the state that fall into these other categories will get additional funding. That's where Republicans say our priority is going to be on student-based needs, and this is how we think is the best way to solve this.
I know we want to move on, but just to say, that's not new. that we have been addressing. We have gifted programs throughout this state. We have special needs programs throughout this state that has been funded in part by state revenue. And so having those types of programs and providing for those is not new. And so I think, let's just be clear here. This is ill-conceived, if for no other reason than Richard Bennett, who spent 3 hours talking about it, doesn't know what it is.
No, Richard Bennett can't explain MAEP, and neither can anybody else in the state of Mississippi because it's so complicated and it's 20 years old.
And we'll have ample opportunity to talk about this again because we'll add issue. Of course, we'll continue to watch the bill as it moves its way through the Senate. Let's move on to the BP settlement money. Mentioned that a moment ago. And the effort by the coastal lawmakers to keep that BP settlement money on the coast, where presumably the oil spill had greater effect. Is that a logical argument that money from the oil spill damages should stay on the coast?
Common sense, I believe. I mean, that's where the damages were. Brandon is a native to the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and that's where the damages were. Individuals, businesses, governments who lost all the things because of the BP oil spill. That's where the damages happen. They're the ones who should get the money. I mean, it seems like a pretty logical choice or decision, in my opinion.
Yeah, that argument seems to have prevailed in the Senate. And my sense is that even though the House didn't pass this bill last year, that was more of a timing issue than anything else. My guess is it'll pass the House. I think all of these questions become a bit more dicey in the context of a strapped state economy because we're just squeezing out programs across the board and going through these very painstaking processes of trying to figure out how to just basic fund all these different agencies and so forth. And I think that complicates the question a little bit, but the legislature seems to have agreed that this is appropriately spent on the Gulf Coast.
Let's talk about the congressional races. We have 3 announced candidates now to in the race to replace Greg Harper, Congressman Harper in the 3rd District, who has announced that he's not going to run for re-election in November. The 3 we know of are Republicans so far.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously the deadline to register, or to file, to run as a Republican or Democrat is going to be March the 1st. So far, we've got 3, Whit Hughes, Michael Guest, and Perry Parker. Listen, Whit Hughes, in full disclosure, is a longtime friend of mine. He's also a client of my firm. Whit's a 15-year native of Madison. Took Mississippi State as the 6th man to the Final Four and has got a deep experience in job creation. Michael Guest, very popular DA from Rankin and Madison County, will run strong in the metro area. And then Perry Parker, who's a businessman, probably less well known from down in Covington County, but you'll see others. State Senator Sally Doty from Brookhaven is thinking about it. I can't imagine others from Rankin County or the other part of the district won't get in, and we'll have 6 or 7 or 8 good candidates running for to be the Republican nominee against a Democrat.
Any Democrats that you know of interested in running?
All I've heard is conversation. It's not ready for full vetting yet. But I mean, right now it's an intramural affair. I think for us, there's been some excitement on the United States Senate side as Commissioner Brandon Presley mentioned a couple days ago that he is not going to run for that seat. And my law partner, Representative David Berry, has given it pretty serious thought.
You're talking about for Roger Wicker's seat?
That's right.
Because he'll be up for re-election in November of this year as well.
Yeah, for the Senate race that is coming up. And I think there is a sense, and some Democrats are going to see if they can capitalize on it, that it's time for some different leadership in the state. I mean, look, Republicans have had the reins, not only at the federal level, but at the state level for some time now. And so we're in a bit of the same position that Republicans were in not too long ago, and they said maybe it's time to try something different. And so we may have a change campaign against an incumbent senator, which is, something a little bit novel.
Yeah, certainly uphill sledding for any Democrat who wants to try to take on Roger Wicker at the state level. He's got a great record, very well liked. But hey, listen, you never know what will happen. I think Roger would obviously be an overwhelming favorite with a primary opponent or in a general election campaign, but can't fault David Berry or someone else who may try to run as a Democrat.
And statewide elected offices will be up soon as well. You're going to have people who are trying to figure out where they might fit in this great puzzle of politics?
Yeah, and for us as the Democratic Party, it's important for us, I think, to give voters a true choice. We haven't always done the best at organizing ourselves in a way to give an honest, true choice in these races. And so our focus over the coming months is going to be to put candidates out there who are credible, candidates who can make an argument, take it to the people, and give them a real choice. So hopefully that'll happen.
Are Democrats encouraged or energized at all by what's happening in other states where high-profile Republicans have either decided not to run again or have not been reelected?
I think absolutely we are, but I think as someone who's been following Democratic politics in Mississippi rather closely for the last decade, we have to be honest and curb some of our enthusiasm to make sure and allow for the action on the ground here and what the numbers seem to suggest. But I think there's opportunity there. And I think well-run, well-communicated campaigns present opportunity. And I think we have some candidates who could give people something to think about.
Yeah, and from the Republican side in 2019, which is when we obviously have all of our state legislative races and, of course, the statewide elected official races plus local races. On the Republican side, you know, the top few offices, you've got people like Tate Reeves, Delbert Hosemann, who will step up and run for, you know, governor and lieutenant governor. Very well-funded people, very well-liked. They've got a good reputation. I think they've done a lot. They've accomplished a lot as lieutenant governor and secretary of state. So you'll have to have some serious Democrats to compete. Everybody's going to look and see what Jim Hood's going to do. He's obviously the standard bearer in the Democrat Party. Not that I have to tell Brandon that, but it'll certainly be interested in Republicans will have a deep bench and a deep slate of candidates to run competitively.
The next few years in politics will give us plenty of material right here on At Issue and beyond. Brandon, Austin, thank you both.
Thank you.
And
Thanks,
thank you for joining us on At Issue. We are out of time. Don't forget you can watch the program on our website, mpbonline.org/issue. And we invite you to join us again next Friday evening here on MPB for another edition of At Issue. Good night.